listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the College Bowl preview for Monday, December 30th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
No time to waste, diving into bowl season. New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and maybe a game or two right after that. Brian Blessing, Bruce Marshall, we're in Las Vegas, and we're fired up for bowl season. Bruce, you gotta, what have you done for me lately? Time to really focus and get going. My favorite games are behind me, and there were games that we talked about. And you both. Well, there's good news and bad news. Both you and I took it in the shorts on the BYU game. We were right, but the coach was wrong. So that one hurt. But absolutely loved Iowa and their travel situation. And you sit there and you get an opportunity like that. And the other one, just loved the over in the Memphis-Penn State game. In Jerry's world, Memphis, really good offense, but there was no way they were going to stop Penn State. To me, the games get a lot tougher now, buddy. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm like you. Well, I'm still mad at BYU. I'm going to go punch Donnie Osmond if I see him after that game. That still bugs me. But yeah, they got the weekend, and Air Force was a big one for us on Friday night, and then Clemson. However you get there, I mean, you cash the ticket. So
great
that
game.
was a wild one. Yeah, it was great. So these, maybe we'll have a few. No, they've kind of thinned out New Year's Day in recent years. Not quite as many games. So back to the old four. This is how it was when we were growing up, Brian. About 4 games on New Year's, and that's what we got again this year.
All right, and we're ready to dive into these games. So let's start with Florida State, Arizona State, and we're looking at the Sun Devils, a 4.5-point favorite. Total on the game is 54, let's call the consensus. The bottom line, Bruce, you're sitting here with a Pac-12 team, and that's what's scary, and specifically Arizona State, 0-7 ATS all-time against ACCs, and 2-8 against the spread in their last 10 bowl games. I can't trust them.
Yeah, it even goes back further now. 4-20-1 the last 3+ years now in bowls, after a couple of them lost over the weekend there, or Friday, with USC and Washington State. This game, this is sort of an example of what's happened to bowl games now, because you've got best players on both teams here. Neither of these teams are involved in anything close to the national title talk. But you got their best players sitting out. I mean, Cam Akers, Florida State, out. He's going to be getting ready for the NFL draft. Benjamin and Brandon Ayuk for the Sun Devils, their top runner and receiver, respectively, out, getting ready for the draft. You've got a coaching change at Florida State. It'll take effect after this game, with Mike Norvell coming in from Memphis, and Odell Haggins in an interim role. Haggins, by the way, did coach them interim in the Independence Bowl 2 years ago, after Jimbo left, and they won that game against Southern Miss. This will be a little bit tougher here in El Paso, but I think, minus a couple of these key guys for Arizona State, that could hurt them somewhat here. This offense moved kind of choppy anyway, with Jaden Daniels, the freshman quarterback, had his moments, but he also struggled some as well. Arizona State is also, with its coordinators have both left. One went to New Mexico to take over the head coaching job, Danny Gonzalez, and Likens, our offensive coordinator, released by Herm Edwards. A lot of funky things going on here. We're just going to go with the anti-Pac-12. 27-24, Florida State. Score forecast down in El Paso.
It's funny, but I'm just listening to you talk and saying sometimes maybe if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and don't overthink it. So let's soldier on and go to the Liberty Bowl with Navy, a 2.5-point favorite. Total on the game is 52. Is it this simple, Bruce? Kansas State, number 2 in the country in red zone offense, number 130 in the country in red zone defense, and Navy's 5-0 against the spread as a bowl favorite. Military teams 34-14 against the bowl spread since 1980. Without going into any other grand detail other than just spitting out those numbers, Navy in the over.
Yeah, those are default options, and just go for it, And it worked again at the Air Force the other night. And the one thing about that point spread, Mark, and I had a debate with somebody at VSiN the other night, was trying to say, well, Troy Calhoun doesn't have that great a straight-up arc in the bowl. No, Listen, when they're outmanned, yeah. I mean, Air Force will lose a game, or Navy will against Arizona State a few years ago when the matchup is terrible and they're just outmanned. But they show up every game. And you know that from a service academy, and you know Navy's going to be here. And I think Kansas State's going to be here too. And listen, Chris Kleiman, their head coach, he won multiples of national titles at the FCS level at North Dakota State. I mean, they're fine. And they did a lot this season, and it turned into a really nice fit for K-State. But no, Navy is something special here. They will show up. This is the best looking option I've seen in a long time. They scored almost 40 per game. With Perry, the quarterback, ran for over 1,800 yards. He is really fast, too. It's like Hammond from Air Force the other night, but Perry's a little bit faster. And this is also a better Navy defense this year. The coordinator they brought up from Kennesaw State did a very, very nice job, Brian Newberry, and they really cut the points and yardage allowed from last year. I think Navy gets them here, 27-22. Mid-shipment. In fact, let's up that a little bit, 34-28. How about that? Navy's going to win this game. I think another over, and we will take the midshipment anchors away.
Oh, okay. All of a sudden, it started to come together again. I'm like, this could be hard. This game, yeesh. Georgia State, Wyoming 7. Total on the game is 48. Hard to get a gauge on either of these teams, Bruce. It looks like an ugly game to me. You don't have to play them all. I'd probably lean under the total, but not in love with it.
Well, I think you make a case for the under here, and you're right. Not all these games are as pretty as the others. They are offering tickets to this one in lieu of community service, I think. Wonderful. Down in Tucson. Because
you're telling me that people will be in the end zone in orange jumpsuits?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I think it is. To quote the great John McLaughlin from the old McLaughlin Group, it is a metaphysical certainty that no Wyoming game can score more than 48.5 points. I don't think it is possible for Wyoming in this offense. And by the way, they're probably going to be down to their third quarterback, Levi Williams, 2 freshmen. Vanderwall, who had taken over for Chambers at quarterback, he's still going to be available in this game, but he's put his name in the transfer portal apparently. They just don't score any points. Look at the unders in this team. They run that old rugby offense. They don't complete passes. And Georgia State would rather run the ball too with their offense. Barnett gained almost 1,400 yards, and they became really dependent upon him. The clock's going to move in this game, Brian, and move and move and move. And I think there's a great call for the under. I don't like a lot of unders in bowls. This one I'm going to like.
Yeah.
We took YO 22-19. I'm strangely compelled by this game. I don't know. I end up. Wyoming kind of interests me for some reason, and I'm just curious if this game could possibly be higher scoring. And I go back to a couple of years ago for Josh Allen for Buffalo to look good running this offense in college. He must have been something special because you watch these guys and it's hard to watch.
Well, we're sitting here saying this could be a Rubik's Cube, and we got 3 games, Bruce, and we're in complete agreement. We're either going to be smiling or going down in flames together here. But so far, so good in terms of a consensus opinion. It doesn't have to be a love fest. We know that. Texas and Utah. Here's one, again, Utah's a 7-point favorite. Total on the game is 55. I think the handicap to this game is you got to be Dr. Phil. Utah's playing Utah's in the Alamo Bowl. 3 weeks ago, they were talking about possibly being in the playoffs, then the Rose Bowl. Now they're at the Alamo Bowl. And if they don't want to be there, their thing is defense. If they don't want to be there, Texas maybe dictates the pace of the game. If they don't want to be there, that would be my guess. I'd probably lean over the total.
Well, yeah, maybe. I keep going back always in my mind to think about spots like this in the past where a team had everything fall apart in that last regular season game, and it's probably happened several times. But Texas A&M 1975 when Emory Brouillard had that option running and they were unbeaten. They had just beaten Texas on Thanksgiving. They had one more game at Arkansas and they got boat raced. And then they showed up in the Liberty Bowl and it was John McKay's last game for SC and they didn't even really show and they lost 20-0. I get the feeling Utah might be in that sort of a predicament here. Now, we used to go with Kyle Whittingham a lot in bowl games, but that's cooled off some in recent years. He's 8-4 against the line in bowls. I think, really, Utah was exposed as a bully by Oregon. And the 2 teams that pushed back on Utah this season, USC and which is doing it with its third-string quarterback in that game, and the Ducks in the Pac-12 title game, they solved Utah, pretty easily there. It is a big, rugged, but slow defensive line for Utah. And when they got a team down, they pounded them this year. They're not going to pound Texas. Tom Herman, who, by the way, has been moving around his staff a lot since the end of the regular season. Got rid of his defensive assistants, got a new offensive coordinator coming in from Ohio State. Next year, it'll be a Texas team to watch. A little disappointing this year, but they can make amends. And Ellinger, the quarterback, is great. Tom Herman, 15-5 versus the number as a dog. He's been great in bowls, 3-0 straight up and against the number as a dog in every bowl game at Houston, Texas, and he has won. I think they win another one. And by the way, don't forget the venue, San Antonio, just down the road from Austin. The traffic's not too bad on I-35. It's just about an hour. So it'll be a big Texas crowd in the Alamo Dome Tuesday night. 26-23 Longhorns. Upset city here for Texas.
Yeah, no, I can see it.
Let's make some money tonight.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. Okay, let's go to Michigan, Alabama. With Bama a 7-point favorite, total on the game is 58. Odd to see a Bama team with multiple losses on their resume. I think Michigan fans will embrace this, and they'll travel and they'll be there. And there are things, and listen, Michigan, you look at their losses. I mean, no disgrace, losing to Wisconsin, Penn State, and Ohio State. But the bottom line is, I think Bama actually, even if there was a level of indifference, I think the fact that LSU is playing for a national championship makes them one mad football team. And Saban just strikes me as the kind of guy, he's starting to build towards next year's championship today. I trust Bama more.
I do too. And one other extra kicker in this one, Saban hates Michigan. He coached at Michigan State, and that's where that enmity built up. And we've heard he's very steely-eyed about this. He does not have a great bowl record in recent years, though. Just to point that out, he's only 3-7 versus the spread. So he's won a couple of national titles on that. 3-7 against the spread in bowls his last 10. However, Michigan, you mentioned it right at the start, they played those 3 big games. They lost them all this year. And that's what Michigan usually does in big games. In fact, they're 0-5 against Ohio State with Harbaugh. They failed in their last 3 bowls, the last 2 against SEC teams, boat race last year by Florida in the Peach. And you just wonder if they're going to be able to slow down Alabama. Mac Jones is good enough at quarterback. No, he's not quite Tua, but he's still got all of those receivers on hand. In the games he started this year, Alabama scored 48, 66. That was against Western Carolina, then 45 in the Iron Bowl. So, I mean, they can still score points. They got sloppy in the Iron Bowl, and that's what blew the game. But I don't think Michigan's going to be able to do that. And just because Harbaugh's track record hasn't been that good, and this is, Alabama. This reminds me a bit of that Alabama-Michigan State game about 8-9 years ago, the year Cam Newton won everything, and they really took out their frustrations on Michigan State. I think they do the same to Michigan. I also think the total's too low here. 44-28, Bama. They win going away. This thing flies over in Orlando on Wednesday.
All right, Bruce, and then let's go to Kentucky, Virginia Tech. Hokies 2.5-point favorites. Total on the game, 46 or 46.5. It is the Belk Bowl. It's in Charlotte. It is a grass field. I'll tell you what, I think both of these teams want to be here. Kentucky, good season against, they've rewarded their backers, 8-3 against the spread. It's a team that got their act together, offensively. Let's say the last game, forget UT Martin, but put 45 up on Louisville. And I thought Virginia Tech really put it together the second half of the season. I actually think this is going to be a fun game, but I think I see a lot of points here.
Well, it could be. Now Kentucky, they're as one-dimensional as you get now. I mean, they might as well be Army since the quarterback injuries, and they went to Lynn Bowden, the wide receiver at quarterback. But the thing is, these teams knew what Kentucky was doing the second half of the season. They still couldn't stop them. I mean, they ran for over 500 against Louisville the last game. And Bowden went for almost 300 himself. They do not pass. All they do is run. I think the clock might run here with them. We'll see how Virginia Tech handles it. Other angle in this game, Jerry Claiborne coached at both of these schools long ago. Great old coach. So in honor of Coach Claiborne, we'll see how this one turns out. Virginia Tech played pretty well down the stretch, but here's another one. For them, their last game, really a deflating one against Virginia, losing that game in the last minute and a chance to face Clemson. That might not have turned out well, but that's the first time they lost to Virginia in 16 years. Hooker, the sophomore quarterback, Hendon Hooker, they started to play well with him. There was something about Kentucky this year, and I love the way they responded to Mark Stoops, and they were really on the ascent. They beat Louisville in that last game. And we're hearing Virginia Tech was really deflated by that loss to Virginia. We'll see how they respond here. I think this game actually moves a little faster and maybe stays under. 23-17 Kentucky. It could end up flying over. It's possible, but I think Bowden and company will keep this thing, the clock moving in Charlotte.
Well, that's a good thing. We can't agree on everything. Just try to hash it out and talk about it. The funny thing is, I'll just throw a weird comparison, and everything you said logically makes sense. But it was about, I guess, more like 3-4 years ago. Remember about Davies' New Mexico team? All they did was run the ball. I mean, that's all they did. But I mean, they were a dead over team, and all, like you said, when a team runs the ball and you can't stop them, just because they're a running team doesn't mean games can't explode. Oh, yeah. And that New Mexico had a lot of – they were a big play running team, so they'd have these 60, 70-yard runs. So sometimes the clock moved faster. One other just note about Kentucky. Since they went they had to, by necessity, go to this run-based offense. That worked out great for Kentucky. They saved their season. It also got Mark Stoops off of Florida State's radar. They thought, we can't hire this guy. This offense is too boring. So Kentucky's really happy. The offense was boring. They got to keep their coach. And he may have gone to Florida State, but he likes it in Kentucky, and that worked out great for the Wildcats and their fans. All right, Bruce, New Year's Day, Minnesota, Auburn, Tigers, 7-point favorites. Total on the game is 53.5. Now, can Fleck, put a Band-Aid on the head wound here? Minnesota was a great story this year, but all of a sudden they started to face tough teams at the end, and they kind of flunked the test. And if you look at Auburn, you get a win over Oregon, maybe, a game that probably cost Oregon a big opportunity at the end of the year. But you're sitting there, you played your lungs out against LSU, and you lost to Georgia, and then you beat Bama. There's no disgrace in anything Auburn's done this year. And the Big Ten's playing well. There's no getting around that. I just think in this spot, if Auburn cares, I think Minnesota's overmatched. I do too, and I credit PJ Fleck for stabilizing this thing at Minnesota. But schedule broke incredibly well for the Gophers this year. Listen, they're non-conference. You talk about a scaled-back slate. No Power 5 teams: South Dakota State, Fresno, and Georgia Southern. They were all ahead of Minnesota deep into the fourth quarter in every one of those games, and Minnesota ended up winning. And then all of a sudden, all these Big Ten teams started to fall like dominoes in various levels of distress facing Minnesota. I've never seen a schedule set up so well. They basically had a month to get ready for Penn State. They did beat Penn State, and they got some big plays from Tanner Morgan, the quarterback, and 3 picks from Arthur Clifford, and they won that game close, hung on in the end. But that was about it. They were spent for us. They lost to Iowa, got destroyed by Wisconsin. Listen, Auburn's schedule was so much tougher this year. Maybe Texas A&M a tougher schedule in the country, but nobody else. Among their victims were Oregon and Alabama, and they played LSU within 3 at Baton Rouge. If anybody thinks Minnesota could have beaten both Oregon and Alabama and played Joe Burrow's LSU within 3 at Baton Rouge, I've got some oceanfront property in Phoenix I'd like to unload to you. There is no way Minnesota could have dreamed about doing what Auburn did this year. And with the offense, and by the way, Minnesota's offensive coordinator has left, and that might be a problem because he had a pretty good rapport going with Tanner Morgan. He's moved to Penn State. Gus beat a Big Ten team really bad last year in Purdue in the bowl, and I think he wins this one handily. 32-17 Auburn score forecast in Tampa. Rose Bowl, Bruce. Wisconsin laying 3 against Oregon, totals 51.5. This is clearly, Big Ten has owned the Pac-12. You know what, bud? In this one instance, I'm not buying it. I think Oregon's defense is surprisingly decent. I think Oregon shows up here. Wisconsin, still think Penn State was the better team. I give Penn State full marks in an entertaining game against Memphis in the Cotton Bowl. But Wisconsin played a good half of football and then got killed by Ohio State, and everybody did a cartwheel because of the first half of the Ohio State game and threw them into the Rose Bowl. I don't think the right team is here representing the Big Ten. I like Oregon.
Yeah, I do too, and I think it's a little different than Pac. This is the best Pac-12 team. This is better than the Washington team a few years ago, and we know the Pac-12 has had trouble against the Big Ten recently, like you mentioned. But Oregon, listen, the Utah game should have opened up everybody's eyes what this team could do, especially when they start playing tempo like that. The second half of the USC game was breathtaking. The way they came back, they sleepwalked 3 quarters against Arizona State. They darn near caught them in the end when they were way behind. But when they're rolling, and we saw that in the Utah game, they can be pretty tough. Wisconsin is functional as always, and that was very impressive what they did in Minnesota at the end of the year. But it's still a run-based offense. Cohn, the quarterback, is not bad, but this is based upon Taylor running the ball. Oregon's defense better than it normally has been. They rank among the nation's rush defense leaders. The difference this year, I think, was Andy Avalos, the defensive coordinator in from Boise State, changed things, changed the scheme. They're a lot more physical defensively, and they've got some good speed there. This is a good defense. You normally don't say that about a Pac-12 team, but this is one that's really good. I think Oregon legitimately could have been Oregon was probably better than Oklahoma, I think, and I would have probably been a better show against LSU had Oregon been there than Oklahoma over the weekend. 31-23 Ducks. This is one I'm agreeing with you. The Pac-12 thing, I think we can overlook that here because Oregon, not like some of these Pac-12 teams losing in bowls lately.
All right, let's go to the Sugar Bowl, Bruce. Fast track, low total, and I'm curious about this. Georgia, 5.5. Total on the game is 41.5. Georgia, SEC hype a little bit here. Just played a lot of close football games. And the one thing about Baylor, they showed a lot of grit. There were some games maybe they didn't belong in, but they just found ways to hang around and get the overtime. It's a Baylor team that doesn't quit. I don't know. I don't know about this one. I'm inclined to take the points, but I may just enjoy.
Yeah, and we did that. We had to make a pick on this, so we took Baylor. We like Matt Rule as a dog. He's a special coach. The way they pushed that thing into overtime against Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game with their third-string quarterback in there was quite impressive. A lot of big plays made by Zeno, though we hear Charlie Brewer is probably going to be able to be at quarterback for Baylor here. But I think the bigger narrative here is on Georgia. We saw the same thing last year for the Bulldogs, lost the SEC title game, though it was in gut-wrenching fashion last year to Bama. Came out really flat in this game against Texas last year and lost. So here's another Big 12 team coming in. Baylor with it was a gut punch against Oklahoma, but they proved they could play with anybody. I think the problem with Georgia is with this offense this year. I think Jake Fromm missed Jim Chaney, the offensive coordinator who went to Tennessee. He never had the same rapport with the new guy. And I am going to predict in the offseason that Kirby makes a big change in this offense. He's seen what happened at LSU. He could do the same thing there. He's got the same sort of material, and I think they're going to upgrade. That'll be next year, not for this game. This offense just doesn't work. I think Baylor's got a shot here. 20-19, we took Baylor to score the slight upset in the Sugar on New Year's night.
All right, let's do a couple on Thursday. BC, Cincinnati. Cincinnati's laying 7. Total is 55.5. In the Birmingham Bowl, the one thing I'd say, it's not the BC we're accustomed to, run and stop the run. I think they have games that can end up kind of track meetish. I'm not that trusting of either team, but I can see this one going up and down the field a little bit, pending the weather.
Yeah, it could be. And Cincy, as long as Cincy shows up here, listen, Legion Field, I've been there. That part of Birmingham. I like Birmingham, not exactly where Legion Field is, and there's not going to be many people here. And this is a team thinking it had a shot at the New Year's Six into that last game against Memphis. So kind of a come down for them. But BC, you're right. Now, a lot has changed there. They've fired Adazio since the end of the season. They've hired one of the coordinators from Ohio State to come in next year. He'll take over after the game. They've got their wide receiver coach, Rich Cannell, promoted here for this game to lead them. The bigger deal is A.J. Dillon, the fulcrum of their offense the last couple of years. He's skipping the game. He's going to go to the NFL. So what we got here for Boston College, a disheveled coaching staff and your offense without your main weapon, not too good. This defense also allowed more than 31 per game this year. That's not BC type levels. Desmond Ritter, the quarterback from Cincy, was hurt late in the season. He's had a month to get that shoulder well. We hear he's fine. He's going to be in there. Warren, the running back, over 1,000 yards the last 2 years. This wasn't the same BC this year, and with Adazio out and out of this transition phase, and especially without Dillon out, we just don't see how BC is going to keep pace. 34-20 Cincy, only a 7-point favorite. I thought that's pretty good value on the Bearcats.
And let's wrap it up with Tennessee and Indiana. It was pick. It's up to 2.5. Tennessee favored. Total on the game, let's call 52 the consensus, Bruce, in the Gator Bowl. Again, not one you're probably racing to the windows unless you got something great for me here. This would be SEC against the Big Ten. That being said, Indiana is excited to be here. I can tell you that.
Oh yeah, I mean they haven't gone to bowls too often, and Tom Allen I think has done a really nice job with that program this year. And I think Jeremy Pruitt did with Tennessee too, and they kind of charged down the stretch, and they won all these games in a row. Indiana was interesting. Their quarterback, redshirt freshman Penix, who won the job early in the season, got hurt. But Peyton Ramsey it was kind of a 1A, 1B thing. Went back in at quarterback, previous starter. He's very good, and he responded big. Threw for 317 against Penn State, 337, 3 touchdown passes at Purdue. Their top running back, Stevie Scott, is possible for this game. He did get hurt late in the season, but this is an offense that really moved the ball. So Tennessee's defense will be tested here. I still don't know that this team moves all that smoothly. Guarantano was in and out at quarterback. Again, Pruitt sort of got the defense going here. But this is not a powerhouse SEC team, and the Big Ten has fared okay in bowls lately, and I think Indiana, I like what Tom Allen's done there. This actually might be an entertaining game and pretty close, but we like the Hoosiers, 28-24 IU in this one in Jacksonville.
There you go, Bruce Marshall from The Gold Sheet. I'm Brian Blessing. We're in Las Vegas. We got you covered through Thursday. We'll come back. We'll dive more into the championship game. A lot coming up later in the week. As always, Bruce, good fun and great information.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and/or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and The Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.